the hyper-competitive $50 market in audio, it really takes a lot to stand out. You really want to make sure that you never pull any punches when providing the best value and the best sound that you can get. But companies have done it. And today we're going to be talking about one such company with one product that came out of nowhere and dared to challenge the reigning kings of the sub-50 market. Let's talk about the EPZ Q5. First and foremost, big thanks to EPZ for sending over the Q5 in exchange for my honest thoughts. All my thoughts and opinions are of my own, and I was not paid or compensated in any way to say anything about the product. Now, EPZ is a brand that some of you may be familiar with, but it is a rather new brand, just being established in 2019, and they are providing the usual hi-fi in-ear products, sources, etc. What you've seen in the chi-fi market as of recent, and what sets apart EPZ from the competition is, I would say, their very consistent level of quality in terms of the products that they've been releasing. And the Q5 is just one of those products that we will be talking about very soon. Yes, there's going to be more to come, but let's talk about the EPZ Q5 specifically, starting with the unboxing experience. The unboxing experience of the Q5 is similar to other EPZ sets with a black background, colored outlines with the specs on the back. Inside, you can find the IEMs themselves attached to the cable already, a carrying pouch, some tips, and some paperwork. While it might not be the best value inclusion set, the carrying pouch is much better compared to other sets that only have a cloth pouch. But arguably the most interesting part of the inclusion set are the tips. Amongst the normal 07 style ear tips lie these white linear looking ear tips that are reminiscent of the Duno SNS. They're not as robust as the SNS, but they provide a very similar, well-balanced sound without boosting one side of the frequency too much. Moving on to the build and fit, the first thing you might notice with the Q5's design is the stark resemblance to the Meze Advar. And while it might look eerily close in terms of aesthetics at first glance, the differences are more evident the more you inspect the IEM itself. The only similar things between the two of them are the vent at the center of the faceplate and the MMCX connector. The inner shell, the shape, and the nozzles are all different between the two. Aesthetics aside, the fit of the Q5 Pro is more comfortable, lightweight, and surprisingly stable with a really good seal. The combination of the slightly longer nozzle and the weird SNS-like tips make this a very snug and comfy fit even for long listening sessions. My only personal gripe would be the MMCX connector, as I have had one too many traumatic experiences with the MMCX. I should note that depending on your ear anatomy, you might experience driver flex on the Q5. I personally didn't experience it, but you might, as people noted on their impressions of the Q5. The cable is fine, a little thin but usable. It reminds me of the SIMGOT cables, but even thinner. You might like this kind of cable if you don't like cable dragging your ear down, but it's admittedly a little fragile feeling. And as for the sound, if you're not yet familiar with the EPZ house sound, well, it's kind of Harman. It's not necessarily a one-to-one Harman, but it is very close to the Harman target, with the rather bass boosted with a little bit of a mid-bass tuck in, not as much as pure Harman sets, but it is kind of tucked to give the mid-range a little bit of a leaner, more open, but at the same time thinner presentation, and a very sparkly, energetic forward and engaging upper mid-range presentation that is once again a hallmark of the Harman sound signature that you either love or hate. And what I really liked about the EPZ Q5 is, despite this, it is able to present a very consistent level of timbre that isn't, overly unnatural, but at the same time it does push out the details a little bit, which we'll talk more about very soon. So starting with the bass, it is surprisingly impactful and deep for this kind of sound signature. I honestly didn't expect that, especially coming into the, hype that was surrounding the EPZ Q5 in the first place, that this was going to be like the $50 best in buy in terms of like brightness and detail, but the bass is surprisingly good. It is decently tactile, not the most tactile that I've heard, but it's very clean, it's very tight, but still very engaging when the track calls for it. I would say that it's not your bass headset, it's not gonna be your thick, lush kind of set. It is just generous and it's just there, but it does act really well. It does sound very nice when the track calls for it. So you have any hip-hop tracks, it is going to bring out the bass really nicely. But you know, if you're looking for more bass or just something a bit warmer or thicker, the Q5 really isn't that, but it's very tight, it's very clean. I would say it's good. And as for the mids, as you might expect, the combination of the somewhat leaner bass and the very emphasized upper mids is that yes, the mids are a little bit thin. It's not as thin as I expected it would be, but it is definitely on the thinner side. Male vocals, bass guitars, thicker instruments just don't sound that engaging to listen to. It's very well defined, it is nuanced, but it doesn't have that tactility or weight that I usually look for in IEMs. But it is very clean sounding, it's very open, it doesn't sound recessed, but it does sound very engaging and immersive. But again, it is kind of thin and doesn't really have that much note weight that I at least personally would like a little bit more. But on the contrary, the upper mids are so nice. Genuinely, I love the upper mids of the Q5. I honestly didn't find it shouty at all. Maybe I just have the natural tendency to not really hear shout as much as other people would, but there is definitely instances of shoutiness on certain tracks. But in general, it is very forward, very engaging, very nuanced, very crisp, but it is harsh free, or free from harshness in my opinion. But if you are sensitive to shout, you might find this a little bit barring or a little bit jarring on that side. But I love the upper mid-range presentation of the Q5. And as for the treble, it's the highlight of the Q5. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you who are going to buy the Q5 already know that this is going to be the thing you're gonna buy the Q5 for. The treble, very crisp, very sharp, very snappy, but smooth. It's not sibilant, it's hot, but it's not sharp in a way that stabs you. It's just really hot, like touching a stove or touching a warm pot. It feels like that, and at the same time, it just sounds so nice to listen to. Very treble-centric tracks, although it might be too much for some people, but it also balances it out on darker tracks. Although the bass kind of gets in the way sometimes, I will say that the treble here is super nice, super crisp, super clean, free from sibilance like I've said, but it is quite hot. Very well extended, I will give them that. Once again, it's not something for treble sensitives, and it's definitely for treble heads like me, especially when considering that the rest of the frequency is, pretty generous until we reach the treble where it's just Sparkle City. And moving on to the technicalities, yeah, no, besides the treble, this is the reason why you'd get the Q5 for. It is a very technical sounding set. Despite that brightness, I don't think that it's just bright out of the gate. It is resolving. It is genuinely very resolving to listen to. Separation and layering are great. Depth of stage is a little bit lacking, but head stage, fantastic. It doesn't feel 100% holographic. It's still a little bit in your head, but for a $50 IEM, for a $55 max IEM, it is insane. Some $90, $70 IEMs, even $100+ IEMs doesn't even reach this level of technicality. But that's the Q5 for you. It is a hallmark of technicality under $100, and it's, if this is just talking about the hype of technicalities alone, I'm already 100% saying yes. If you're wanting a technical sounding set for under $100, Q5 is insane. Compared to the SIMGOT EW200, the EW200 has a more engaging, richer, thicker, and more focused sound that emphasizes the tactility of the mix rather than making it sound smooth and crisp. The lower mids of the EW200 also sounds thicker and richer, albeit still lacks the tactility that I personally look for. The Q5 sounds cleaner overall, with a snappier and smoother sound with better layering and separation, and an overall more refined sound that isn't as aggressive as the EW200. You honestly can't go wrong with either set, but if you want tactility and well-defined transients, you go with the EW200. But if you want a smooth and crisp sound, you go with the Q5. Compared to the Q1 Pro, The Q5 still pulls ahead of the Q1 Pro in most scenarios, but the Q1 Pro is less offensive sounding than the Q5, so treble-sensitive people should probably opt for the former. But technicalities, resolving ability, and tonal balance, I'd personally take the Q5. Compared to the CCA Duo, both sets feature a bright U-shaped sound, but the lower mids of the Duo sounds more rich, engaging, and more nuanced compared to the Q5. It also has a better timbre overall compared to the Q5, but the Q5 has the superior technical ability and details. Compared to the CCA Rhapsody, the Rhapsody has a considerably more fun, engaging, and rich sound overall, but lacks the refinement of the Q5. The Rhapsody also suffers from a little bit of incoherency on the bass transitioning into mids and treble, so the overall sound is more harmonious on the Q5. The Q5 is also more technical than the Rhapsody, but the Rhapsody is richer, deeper, and the more fun sounding set. And to finally conclude, is it worth the hype? Yeah. I honestly think that it's really worth the hype. There's so many things that's going right with the Q5 in my opinion. I think there's so many things that you could love in this IEM. There are some things that you might not, like the MMCX personally, the questionable design, and for people who are sensitive to it, the treble, or people who want just a little bit more thicker bass. But as an IEM that focuses on technicality, brightness, details, the Q5 is just crazy. It follows a very similar target to the EW200 in my opinion, and it honestly competes with it pretty well. It's a somewhat different I guess sound signature. Not sound signature, but it's a very different experience overall, because the Q5 is a different IEM after all, different drivers, different everything, and the thing that they only have in similar is the frequency response graph, but the experience is very different, and honestly, like I said, you would not go wrong with either of them. So yeah, if you want a very technically capable, bright, sparkly set, and you're not a treble-sensitive person, the Q5 is great. It is a great choice, great buy, great option for under $100. And yeah, that's the review for the EPZ Q5. If you like this video, consider liking. If you want to see more of my content, consider subscribing. Check out my socials, check out the Discord, check out Audio Notions, join Forsaken Audiophiles, and with that, obodio out.